Holla ballers, what's going on? It's Preacher. Today we're hopefully going to prevent your guild from ending up on the front of MMO Champion with my guild died. Jokes aside, I never like to see any guild die. Regardless, it's never fun because that's where your friends and your buddies are, hopefully, for the most part. I know some guilds are actually tragic messes, but generally speaking, a guild should be a place of fun and where you get to meet up with the guys you like on a regular basis. And over the Nighthold, we lost many. Oh my god, we lost many. So, on that note, many of you might say, shouldn't you have made this video like 8 months ago, Preacher? We didn't know. We didn't know, right? We didn't know it was going to be like this. So we're doing it now, so hopefully in the future it'll help you guys out. How are we going to go about this then? Every guild's different, for sure. We're going to use my guild as an example because while all these guilds were falling, our guild, maybe by luck or maybe not, only lost like a couple of members over the course of the entire 8-month progress treadmill that some of you are now running into your 9-month with. We only lost, I think, 3 or 4.
I left! Fuck that guild!
You were never in my raid team, so
Good
you
point,
legitimately count less than a shaven pube.
Ow!
That's what I'm saying. So yeah, that's why we're going to look at it and look at what our guild did to make that work. And some people might go, well, your guild must have it dead easy. That's why no one left. No, of course not. Guilds face problems all the time. You're dealing with people, for Christ's sake. And people, like Dickhead, can be dickheads. Can be dickheads. And that happens all the time. So it's how you deal with that and how you approach your guild mentality that hopefully is going to get you over the bad times. Because that's what it's all about. It's great and everything's wonderful when things in game are working well. But when you hit a stumbling block, you don't want the guild to fall apart. So what I did is I sat down with the GM and raid leader of our guild, Mr. Piroen, and Mr. Nups, and recorded about an hour-and-a-half podcast with those guys. Now, it's very detailed, and if you're really interested in this stuff and you want to know a bit more, I suggest you listen to that. So I've linked that below in a YouTube video and on SoundCloud. Yeah. So that way, it's not going to put people off getting the basics. I'm going to like summarize some things here, and the real meat and 2 veggies in that longer podcast that you can do whenever you want. My mic's also iffy for the first 30 seconds, and in this world, that means everybody would turn the video off, as we well know. So go and listen to that if you're more interested. But let's talk about some of the stuff we did, which enabled us to lose very few players and gain 5 trials over the course of Nighthold. Out of the, I think we trialed 15 or so people, only 5 made it. Was that because our guild's full of dickheads, or was that because of something else? The big thing that started off in the conversation was you have to build the correct environment for your guild, right? You have to build that, and it takes time. What generally happens when people start guilds is a couple of buddies, because me and Andy have done this, is go, let's make our own guild. Right? And that's it. That's about as far ahead as you think. We're going to be, or you might go, we're going to be the best raid guild that ever lived and stand atop mountains over the fallen bodies of our enemies. Something silly like that. But what you actually don't think about is the effort and stuff that's going to need to be done. And you don't think about the environment that you really want to play in. You just want it to be awesome. And when you realize that everything just goes swimmingly and is all rainbows and lovely sweeties all the time, then you might enforce some sort of utterly ridiculous rule like, there's no drama in my guild, which is about as effective as liking something on Facebook, let's be honest, and doesn't actually reflect what happens in real life. So what you're trying to do with your guild is form an environment that you want to be in, and you want to find like-minded people to be in it. And then you're going to build the guild community. Now, at the start, this is very difficult. Everybody accepts that. You generally just get enough numbers together so you can start doing stuff. And then over time, you're going to cultivate an environment where you'll lose some people, but what you're going to gain is people who enjoy this environment. And then after a little while, you end up with a guild full of people who fit into this environment, right? That's what we're trying to do. So you have to set a guild goal. What is the goal? If I was to ask that to probably nearly everyone listening to this, I imagine most of the guild's goals would be something like, we're going to do heroic, we're going to do normal, we're going to do friend stuff, we're going to do mythic plus, we're going to nighttime raid, we're going to daytime raid, we're going to go for mythic raiding, we're going to do PvP, we're going to do RBGs, we're going to do arenas, all this kind of stuff. That's not really what I'm asking. What are the officers? What's the environment? What's the goal of the guild? And when I asked this question to our team, they came back with an interesting answer. And what they go for is this. We try to create an environment where the people in our guild are having fun. A very, very basic foundation idea. We want the people in our guild to be having fun. And when you think about it, that's pretty cool. Because what happens if people are having fun is they want to log in, they want to play together, they want to overcome challenges together. If things are bad, you're dealing with people who are together and bonded over different reasons. And not only that, part of having fun is killing bosses, right? So that also means that you're going to be actively trying to and proactively weeding out the problems in the guild so that the fun environment remains for your core team. A lot of guilds fail when the core environment falls apart because people stop having fun, they don't want to log in. And that can come in many different ways. So I'm going to break this into two things. One is going to be communication, one is guild management. And it's all under the header of this building the correct environment, right? So communication. I talked earlier about people who just go, we don't have no drama, bro. It's like, there's no drama here, mate. And if someone says, I've got a problem, they go, shut up. No, you don't, mate, because you're causing drama, mate. Happens all the time, right? We see it everywhere in drama time. Is people with these universal global rules where what they're actually doing is somebody saying, I have an issue. We're not dealing with that issue. We're just telling you to shut the fuck up about it. That doesn't make the issue go away. In fact, what happens is those issues fester, right? You're dealing with people. These are human beings. Those issues fester. People take sides. Then you have all these problems bubbling up. So what our officers said is that they've observed many times where, one, the officer team, our guild consists of 5 officers, including the GM, is to be accessible. So often the officers tend to drift off and form this sort of officer team, and then you get this almost us and them situation, like the raiders or the members or whatever your guild's goals are, and then the officers in this different team. They have like a different chat channel, which is locked off to everyone else, but they spend a lot of time in there. They're not doing official things in there. They're just playing the game in there. They don't want to talk to you guys. When they do Mythic Plus in Legion, they do it themselves, right? They do it amongst their little team, and they don't do, and that what that does is create this wall, right? So what our GM went into this length about was that he often tries to leave the GM officer title at the door. It activates in raids, and outside of that, it then disappears unless it's needed. So he then, and all the other officers, actively take part in doing dungeons, doing other content, doing alt runs, doing all these PvP things, all these things with the rest of the members to ensure that, one, they're making new friends. You built this guild so you could make friends and find people who are like-minded with you in the game. And also, this creates the accessibility where, let's say you've got a guild, and these always seem to pop up every now and again, where it's run by some tyrannical dickhead, right? And for some reason, because he managed to find his way to buy a guild charter, he is now the god of World of Warcraft, and your suggestions or opening comments to him are to be taken while you are on a knee, and you must grant the audience with him, right? You must be granted presence, you must receive your ticket. I'm exaggerating a bit, but you understand when somebody's unapproachable and tends to get angry or rage, and so therefore you just don't talk to that person. What this leads to, again, is things festering up. Being accessible means that if somebody has a problem or you want to discuss things with people, then that's a very, very fast system. Again, trying to prevent these things from bubbling up. So proactivity comes into here. The proactivity our guild talked about was that sometimes people are shy and they don't really like telling you about an issue, but they will talk to somebody in the guild. Via the officers being accessible, somebody else might mention, did you know that Mike's like not happy with Mage? This is just an example. Did you know Mike's been like playing this alt for a lot, and I'm pretty sure he mentioned he wasn't happy with Mage. But maybe I'm not approaching the officers with that comment, right? What our guild does is actively, when they see that guy online, it's like, hey, can we have a word for 2 minutes? We've heard you're not happy with your Mage. What's the situation there? Is there something we need to know about? And actively go after these situations to try and sort them out quickly. Otherwise, you end up with what so many of you tweet me and email me is, I want to re-roll, or I'm not happy in the game. What do I do? And I've now left it to the point where you're emailing me. So it might have been weeks, months of being unhappy in game. What do I do? Trying desperately to avoid that situation. Also makes the environment far more relaxed when these things are dealt with quickly, right? They're dealt with quickly and sorted out. On the back end of this proactivity, another thing that our guild does, which you might find interesting, is that there's an officer meeting just before the raids, right? Which is usually getting together. Where are we going? What are we doing tonight? Have we got anybody missing who's kind of important? What order are we going to do the bosses? We're going to do Elisand and Gul'dan first, and then go and clear the rest on Mythic, or what are we thinking of doing tonight? Are we going to go and do a Chosen run, or are we going to do this or that? And then the raid starts. Now, during the raid, because we're all human, somebody might fuck up, or you might expose something good and bad. So I want to be clear here. This can be both good and bad. Somebody does something exceptional and you notice it, Or somebody's doing something that's like, why is he doing that? Actually, that's really weird. Or you check a log afterwards and you realize some guy was like totally ignoring a part of the fight to try and cheese his own rankings, and that meant other people are frustrated because they're having to pick up that person's slack. All these kind of things are happening. And being proactive, what our guild does is at the end of the night, they might say, Mike, can we have a word with you for 2 minutes? They deal with it there and then. Like, that night, they're like, yo, we just noticed this is happening. That's not cool, man. Like, people are pissed about that. We're pissed about that, even if no one else is. Don't do that, right? Don't do that. And then it's dealt with before the next day. What they don't do is many officers don't like confrontation, which is why you kind of got to pick your officer team pretty quickly, right? Pretty decently. Trying to avoid confrontation. Hopefully this problem will go away. What actually happens, of course, is the problem doesn't go away because that person hasn't been told that what he's doing is wrong. So he got away with it last week. I'm definitely going to do it next week, right? And then someone else joins in. And then your team that is picking up the slack is growing more and more frustrated. Not only that, they're losing faith in the officer team. They're not, like, this problem's occurring. You've mentioned it to somebody, right? Did you notice that Andy wasn't doing something or whatever? And you're just like, this isn't being dealt with. I'm unhappy. This problem's now going on for next reset after, and nothing's being done. And then it snowballs into a problem where other people are like, have you noticed this is going on? It's like, dude, I told the officers about that like 3 weeks ago. That guy's a fucking... And it just escalates, right? It escalates so quickly to create this toxicity in your guild. It's no good. It's no good. So what our guild does is deal with it on the night. Even sometimes during the raid, if it's a real big issue, they said on occasion, they drag people out and say, yo, what's going on there? Like, or if the healing's been bad for the night, they might drag the healer out and like, healing's been really shit tonight. What's the situation there? Is there something we can do to help? And it's not a bollocking. This came across very clearly from both officers. It's not a case they drag you in and like, what the fuck, dude? You fucking suck! It's a case of, what's happening? Is our DPS taking too much damage? Or we're not helping you in some ways? Is it a new setup? Are you trying something new that we're not aware of that you didn't mention in the earlier meeting? What's happening? Is there anything we can do to help? And via that process, you don't get these festering problems. The problems occur as they occur in every guild, but they're dealt with quickly. They're definitely dealt with quickly. I brought re-rolling earlier, which I'm sure is one that many of you have run into if you've ever been in a guild, is like, I'm just not happy with my class anymore. Blizzard's made some changes or something along those lines. For whatever reason, you're like, I don't like this. Now, being accessible is the first point. Most people will bring it up to the classes. Bring it up to the officers as like, I'm not happy. But at the same time, there has to be, as Piroen put it, is you have to make sure you're walking the fine balance of choices you're making for the guild and choices for the player. So I mentioned earlier that that the goal of our officers is to make an environment where people are having fun. If someone dislikes their class, they're not having fun. Therefore, that's a problem, and something needs to be done there. But you have to bear in mind you're a whole guild team. Right? This is a team effort. No boss falls over on its own. So in that respect, you hope that the player has the respect, and Piroen called it the unwritten rule. If we're working on, say, Mythic Gul'dan, and you're playing a certain role, like I'm on my mage, right? So I'm Mythic Gul'dan, I'm learning progressing Mythic Gul'dan, I'm the only mage in the team, and I'm dealing with the Night Orbs at the end. What an absolute fucking arsehole of me to go, I don't really like mage anymore. And then go, you know what, I'm re-rolling. It's like, well, we don't even have a mage to fill this up. You're literally going to cook the entire team doing that. Why would you do that? You hopefully have respect both ways to say, yo, when Mythic Gul'dan's down, I kind of want to think about re-rolling to something, because once we're on farm, that's the best opportunity. But I'm going to stick with my mage for now, obviously, for the good of the team. But this is definitely something on my mind. Making them aware, being early with communication, making the accessibility there, and talking about it. And then the officers are probably going to go, cool, all right, stick with it till we get this boss down. And then we'll see what the situation is and what you feel like re-rolling, and we'll see where it goes from there. What you can't do, which is what so many people do, we'll talk about this a bit more in the trial process, is somebody comes to you saying, I'm unhappy. And it could be even your tanks, like, I really don't enjoy this anymore. And then do something like this. Okay, we'll deal with it, and nothing happens. And you just leave that guy in the spot because you don't want to find another tank. Or you don't go, you will play your tank. Right? You will play your tank. Because that guy's, again, going to be unhappy. He's going to disappear. On occasion, it does come down to the point where you say, let's say we've got 3 Demon Hunters. And you're like, I want to reroll Demon Hunter. Of course, you're going to say, we have 3 Demon Hunters. What are you going to do? What's your thought process here, right? There's that balance to walk between making the player happy and keeping the guild happy. And sometimes making the individual, telling them straight and being open about it and saying, look, you're making a really selfish decision. This isn't going to fly, is something you might have to do. There's always good and bad sides to this stuff. The next thing I want to talk about, that was communication. I want to talk about guild management. How do our officers actually manage the guild? And I found out so many things that I just didn't know existed. So, in terms of the trial process, let's talk about that. I didn't know how the trial process works in our guild. What we do at the start of every expansion is every member of the team is busted down to trial, and they stay like that for 6 to 7 weeks until we're well into raiding. And there's good reasons for that Piroen goes into in terms of trying to make sure, one, some people don't like the class changes. Maybe they're not happy with what the new expansions is like, and we need to work things out. Also, that we're trialing again. So if you're not pulling your weight and you feel comfortable because you were there with us for HFC, so like you've got a spot forever, right, bro? I'm sure many of you know those people who seem grandfathered in despite the fact they fucking suck and are lazy as all hell. Is to say, we're not going to play that because that's bad for the guild. That creates the bad environment. That's going to lead us to having problems later. And then a few weeks later, of course, it's like a half-half trial. Let's not get ridiculous here, but they're just, that's the message being sent out. When it comes to new trials in our guild, similar to what the members went through, which, again, a lot of trials don't seem to appreciate this. The members went through the same thing. It's a minimum 6 weeks in our guild. I had no idea. It's a minimum 6 weeks. And then you're going to ask the question, I'm sure many of you are thinking it, is that based on performance or is that something else? Over recent years, I would say the weight of your performance has drastically reduced in your chances of being a part of a guild. Probably a few years ago, maybe let's say 2-3 years ago, if you were a shit-hot DPS and that was it, but you were a total cunt bollocks, right? You literally sputed jism out of your nose every time you spoke. You were probably going to get into a top-end guild because all they wanted was your DPS or your tanking or your healing, right? In recent years, especially with a lot of other guilds collapsing, guilds have had the freedom to say, we don't need you. Our guys actually perform really well already, and we can get other top-performing guys who aren't cunty bollockses. We can do that. Much more difficult the lower down in the guild levels you go, obviously. But there's definitely been that shift towards we're building an environment here, and it's not based on just getting boss kills. That will come as a natural byproduct of building the correct guild. Similar to how I think about loot. I don't care about loot because I care about killing bosses. Loot comes naturally. If you defeat the bosses, the loot's going to come. It's as simple as that. It doesn't work any other way. And the way guilds approach it now, or certainly our guild does, is they check everything. From the application, Nups, you went into detail about why the application process is important for those people who don't really get it. And then what goes on over this 6 weeks. So what our guild does is they have feedback sessions every like couple of weeks or so with the trial. And that could be a good thing as well. I think a lot of people see guilds as if you speak to the officers of the GM, it's in trouble. This is not the case whatsoever. In fact, if you build the correct environment, your officers will more than often be asking for your opinion on things, just to get different perspectives. So through that process, you might get told various things. One good example, if you didn't listen to the podcast that I want to bring up here, is that I did a video a while ago about the collapse of the cesspool guilds, and that all these players were sort of filtering out like almost an immigration to real guilds, like discovering them for the first time and bringing with them a lot of bad habits that they picked up in the cesspool guilds. That's actually been a real problem that Piroen brought up that he's had to deal with on several occasions. So an example that was told to me was players who had never been told in the past that linking logs, bragging about your own performance, and generally trying to make yourself look like the absolute tits is something that a real guild thinks you're a dickhead for. Because the guilds they had come from, that was like, oh, he's really good. He did all the damage. What's a guy? And then you get to a real organized guild and it's like, you think you soloed this boss or what, bro? Like, if anything, most of us play our classes near enough to the max they could possibly be. Our rankings are all like, our guild carries many world first speed kills, right? And many rank ones. It's like, you're no better than anybody else here, right? You're no better than anybody else here, and you can't be. We're officially limited by our class and gear at this point for the most part. So it becomes a case of you look like a twat. You might think that when Piroen brought this up to people as they do in the feedback session, it's like, hey, you're actually kind of arrogant. We don't really like it when you're linking, you're spamming and talking about yourself like that. Well, I would expect those guys to lose their mind. And sure, every now and again they did. But what actually happened more often than not, in the vast majority of cases, was players saying, I didn't realize that was like something that people would look down on me for, because in all the guilds I've been in the past, that was a relatively normal thing. Whereas now, no, that's not a normal thing, in fact. You know what I mean? This is a team effort. We're building a team environment. Again, coming back to the overarching thing. And therefore, this is not something we approve of. And also these feedback sessions through the trial process are also for positive things. That was really cool. We got great feedback from you in Mythic Plus with the guys. We heard you we heard you fit in quite well with our sense of humor on Discord, you know? Or maybe it's like you seem to be shouting at people. You know, it can be good and bad. There's always grey areas here. It's not black and white in any case. And therefore, this trial process goes on, and maybe they extend the trial. They did say that one guy ended up on trial for 3 months, but it was because they forgot that he was still on trial until somebody else pointed it out. It's like, did you know this guy's still on trial? And then now forever that guy's the permanent trial in the guild. But that can happen because they're looking for all kinds of things. Performance is one thing. That's almost a given these days, especially as you go higher up. Your performance is a given. What's next is how you socially fit into the guild and maintain this environment. Otherwise, we're going to end up with people who cause frustration, cause toxicity, like we talked about in part 1. And ultimately, this toxicity tends to build, and your other raiders are like getting unhappy, and it all starts to fall apart, right? You've got to be able to fit in with the guild. The next one that we talked about was loot and how is it handled. It came down, interestingly, to all out. I don't really know. Again, it's the loot care system. But it turns out that Piroen does 100% of our loot. And I can swear with hand on heart that in Legion, there has never been a single loot drama in our guild. And it's all handled by one guy. So is that because Piroen runs with a tyrannical hand? Well, if you listen to him speak, obviously not. He's actually one of the most relaxed guys ever. The fact is he's earned that respect, right, from all of us because it's done fairly. There's no shenanigans, there's no bullshit going on. It's all done fairly and therefore no one ever catches it up. So how is that done? Kind of brings us back to part 1, communication. Piroen accepts that he doesn't know every single detail of every single spec in this fucking game like some guild masters do, right? So when it comes down to maybe an odd choice, both people have a similar item level, it's an equally item level upgrade for both. Ask the question, just talk like, yo, who's getting the best out of this? Is this making a 4-piece, or is this going to help out when you get a legendary, or what's the story with it? And through that communication, all the raiders hear this going on and understand that he's just making whatever's the best choice with that loot, and that works well. In terms of guild management then, one big thing I wanted to talk about was dealing with harder bosses. And what I meant here is not just the hard bosses, but every now and again, anybody who's been in a raid team will understand that occasionally you run up against a boss that should die and fucking doesn't, man. You don't know what's going on. We had this in my mind with the Emerald Dragon's Mythic. It seemed incredibly easy on paper, but it cost us so many wipes that it made no goddamn sense. It was crazy. It was absolutely crazy. And it was hard to work out what was going on because obviously the teams are split in two. So they had officers positioned around the team and obviously started to ask people, what's happening here? What's going on? And that's where everything you did in part 1 with the communication and making the right environment comes into play. Because during these times, this is when a guild that's made up of anybody who just does performance well is going to start going, this is fucking well shit. These guys suck. I'm carrying this team, and start moving on. Instead of trying to work as a team to figure out what's the problem, maybe we can help with that. So that's how they deal with that stuff, is going through logs, really turning up the heat on stuff outside of raids to make this happen. Outside of raid management, it was reasonably extensive by our officer team when preparing for a new raid, but after that it drops off quite nicely, and it's all about constantly recruiting. Constantly recruiting. Our guild never turns off recruiting. I don't think any guild should. And the reason for this should be pretty obvious by now if you've listened to this, is that you're trying to build this correct environment, and by doing so, it takes time. It takes time to get to a place where you want to be. And our guild could collapse in Tomb. There's no saying that won't happen. But the solutions that you could do ongoing is to always have recruitment open, because you never know who's going to apply the next day. You never know who's going to turn up. We did trial about 15 people, and yes, only 5 made it. But out of those 5, they're in there, and they're part of this team, and they're going to meet each other IRL. And that leads me to the final point here, is meetings IRL. Something I think has contributed greatly to our guild success is actually following through with that. So many guilds talk about it and don't do it. It builds bonds, because now you're playing with your friends. Like actual friends. Not just online friends, real friends who you've met. You might have shared a room with if you've gone to some sort of hostel together, or you've organised a party like our guild does. You might share rooms, you're definitely going to have some beers, you're going to have some laughs, you're going to create some memories. And when you do run into the tough spots, when that does happen, you have a better bond than a bunch of anonymous voices on the internet. And I really, truly recommend you guys get on board with that. So that's the summary there. I suggest you listen to the whole thing once again, because it will give you far more detail, far more context, and some specific examples of this stuff. Thank you so much for listening. Bye-bye.